Good morning, everybody. It's Nigel Farage. I'm here in Manchester, where, of course, the Conservative Party conference kicks off today. Lots and lots of Conservatives arriving today from all around the country, even more protesters, if we believe some of the PR that's being put out by groups like Momentum and others. It is clearly a week that is going to be a very great challenge for Theresa May as Prime Minister. Of that, there's no doubt. It's the first real gathering of the party since a general election that she called, that is seen by many to have been unnecessary, didn't deliver a majority, and breathed life into Corbynism. Joining me to sort of set the scene is LBC's political editor, Theo Ashwood. Theo, good morning.
Very good morning to you, Nigel.
Tell me something. Is this like a sort of happy family wedding where everyone's coming together? Or is it like one of those family weddings where one half of the family haven't spoken to the other half for 30 years and still don't want to?
I think it's the latter, where you have lots of step-parents and children that some people might not quite know about, and there is, I think, perhaps going to be something of an explosion. Theresa May has to hold it together. She's had her first test this morning. It hasn't gone very well in the broadcast.
Now, this was the interview that she did with Andrew Marr, and I was watching that earlier. It's quite interesting at the end. She did appear to go quite red in the face. The eyes looked like they were starting to glisten. I mean, look, I've been in that position myself. I know we can overanalyze some of this, but she did not look comfortable, did she?
She did not look comfortable. She was speaking very, very quickly, which is often a sign of nerves, pressed repeatedly about answering the question. Interesting on Europe, she said that we'd have to accept ECJ law during the transition period. That will go down very badly, Nigel, with many Eurosceptics within her own party, and only adds strength to Boris Johnson's case when he sets down those red lines, as he did in yesterday's Sun newspaper interview.
But that's all well and good, but there's another wing of the party, of course, and as I speak, Michael Heseltine's on a screen behind us, and of course Ruth Davidson, who is in some ways a bit of a rising star in the party. I mean, she was saying yesterday that she wouldn't be totally unhappy if we stayed in the single market in some kind of arrangement. I mean, who's got the upper hand here? Is it the Remainers, who want to kick this into the long grass, want us, as in line with the Florence speech, effectively to sort of sign up to everything under a different badge? Or is it Boris and the Brexiteers? Who's winning this battle?
At the moment, if you want my opinion, who is actually winning this battle, it is the Remainers. Two reasons I'll give you for that. 2 weeks before the Florence speech, Philip Hammond was in a grand committee of MPs and peers, and he then first floated the idea that we actually switched to leaving the European Union at the end of the transition period. That came from the Chancellor Philip Hammond. 2 weeks later, Theresa May says the same thing in Florence when she stands up and makes that speech, which in effect is seen in Europe at least as changing the tone. Michel Barnier, Jean-Claude Juncker now want to do a deal. They feel like they've really won the argument, but, and I don't think you can discount this, the Boris Johnson wing of the party, the Eurosceptics, the Jacob Rees-Moggs, they're a force to be reckoned with, and they have the membership, Nigel. They have the membership.
I think that's the point, isn't it? The parliamentary party, the majority of them voted for us to remain, but of the party faithful who are coming here to Manchester, would it be 70% were Brexit?
Probably more. If you're looking at those who are here, and the key thing is that whoever becomes the next Conservative leader is going to have to win them over. There's a feeling within the party from those that I've spoken to, no more coronations. Coronations are a bad idea because what you have is you have a situation which you had last time with Theresa May. Andrea Leadsom simply stood aside, and somebody put it to me, we didn't get the chance to kick the tyres. And had they had that chance, they would have seen some fragility when it came to Theresa May and her ability to campaign.
Well, I mean, you're right. In the end, it was a coronation, and this has upset people. John Strafford, who is the Campaign for Conservative Democracy, a real veteran of the voluntary side of the party, been around forever, he said yesterday that the Conservative Party membership is now below 100,000, that it's fallen from 150,000 in 2013. I mean, is there a feeling amongst these Conservatives that actually their days as a political party, given their current structures, are effectively numbered?
There is, and I think there are those in the party who are trying to change the course. There's a feeling Jeremy Corbyn tapped into the youth vote like never before. And it's worth remembering this, with George Osborne, he was cynical, he was ruthless in the way that he went after the silver-haired vote. With
Yes.
the way he targeted pensioners in every budget to make sure that they were better off. They're making sure pensions, benefits, savings, whatever it was. And he didn't help those younger voters enough. And now they have to find a way of engaging with younger voters in almost an impossible climate when you're coming up, the Conservative Party are coming up against Jeremy Corbyn, who is promising to scrap tuition fees, in effect overhaul the system. And they need to find a way of saying, well, okay, Jeremy Corbyn won't deliver for you in that, but we can deliver this. And so far,
which they're trying to do, aren't they? I'm looking at
freezing fees is
I'm looking at the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, the Sunday Express, Conservative supporting and leading newspapers, talking about as if it's a revolution on student fees, and that somehow young people are going to come in droves to the Conservative Party.
Because they're going to come out with £30,000 of debt just on their fees, or just shy of £30,000 of debt.
So, but this appears to be the big pitch at the start of the week, and let's just remind people tuning in that the total annual level of tuition fees will not rise above £9,250 a year, and that students, once they're in work, will not start paying the money back until they're earning $25,000 a year as opposed to 21. Is this the big revolution of the week?
There's been a lot of, how shall I put it, mocking on social media about the use of the word revolution in that particular headline on the front of the Sunday Telegraph. And that's the difficulty that Theresa May faces and the government faces, in that they're simply scratching the surface of a very significant problem when it comes to young voters. Now, having said this, and this is what we're going to hear a lot of during this Conservative Party conference, it's going to be about moderation. We can actually, this is what the Tories are going to be saying, Jeremy Corbyn might be promising to scrap tuition fees, to make it better off, to overhaul the system. What we're going to hear a lot from the Tories about is Jeremy Corbyn, Labour are going too far. What you need is some changes, some small changes that we can actually deliver, so we can freeze tuition fees. That's going to be a theme that runs right through this conference. It's going to be about delivery, and it's going to be about just
they're the responsible party
and the balanced approach,
rather
than trying to simply rip up the system.
Do you think, given, and you've said so yourself, the first May interview has gone pretty badly? I watched it. She virtually refused to answer a single question.
It's very difficult for her to answer any question.
Just didn't answer. It may be difficult, but you've at least got to be seen to answer a question, and she didn't. Is she going to survive this week?
I think she'll survive this week. I think what's keeping her in power is somebody has to come along within the Conservative Party. They need to put their hand up, and they need to say, or probably more than one person, given that there has to be a contact, people need to put their hands up and say, I'm ready to take on Jeremy Corbyn. Because it is no longer feasible to simply say there'll be a coronation. They need to bounce on to the fact that they would be prepared to call an election. And then, of course, Brexit ties into that. What's their vision for Brexit? The way the party is at the moment in terms of selecting that leader, you'd have to go with a Brexiteer.
And is Boris pitching for that job?
Boris wants that job, absolutely. Of course he wants that job.
And is he going to be the darling of the hall this week?
I think they're going to be two leader speeches.
Theo Usherwood, LBC's political correspondent. You're in for a few days of intrigue, I think.
Absolutely.
And I noticed that you're dressed down today. Normally I see you in the LBC London, and you've got a tie on and top button done up. And just explain your dress code today.
The dress code today is a little bit dressed down. We're going to go out and we're going to be speaking to people out in the streets of Manchester about their feelings, because there are going to be some rallies. We're expecting, and we've seen some quite stark images, haven't we, in the front pages of the papers, and of banners saying "Hang the Tories" and effigies of suited men hanging from bridges. And so I'm going to go out and I'm going to meet Conservatives. 2 years ago I was here, I was wearing a suit, I was walking in to the conference centre, and I was spat at, and I had spit right down my coat, and so therefore...
And you're only a journalist.
I'm only a journalist.
I can imagine what Tory MPs are going to feel like walking through that.
Well, big questions were asked of Greater Manchester Police. Big questions were asked of Greater Manchester Police last time. I've just driven over, and I've never seen a security presence like it. And the roads are blocked off.
They're doing their best, aren't they?
They're doing their absolute
best.
best.
The days of class struggle are back. Theo, thank you. Enjoy the next few days. Well, very interesting. I think Theo's comment that there are going to be 2 leader speeches, one from Mrs May and one from Boris Johnson, I think is about right. And these splits are fascinating, aren't they? Because on the one hand, you've got a cabinet that appears to be absolutely irreconcilably split. But my sense is that Theo's right. When it comes to the people in the hall, however, whether it's 3,000 or 4,000 of them, whatever it is, I'm absolutely convinced that most of those people are going to be Eurosceptic. And I just wonder, they may well show what they think over the course of the next few days. As for Mrs May, I have to say, I think as a leader, she is useless. She doesn't answer questions. She has no humour. She's wooden. She shows no empathy with ordinary people whatsoever. And to make it worse, she never delivers. She didn't deliver as Home Secretary. She's not delivering as Prime Minister. She's tried to kick the Brexit can down the road with this transition period, thinking the problem would go away. Actually, it's getting worse. And I think, to be honest with you, support is simply melting away. I think she's in for a very, very difficult time. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show here from Manchester at the Tory Party Conference, and the time now is 10:15. Well, it's Theresa May's big week, and there are many that think she's not made a very good start with her first TV interview this morning, where she appeared to flush up a little bit, perhaps even a glisten in the eye, as she was accused of simply not answering any questions. I say accused. Actually, factually, she wasn't answering any questions. So I'm asking you, and I'm particularly keen, if you're a Tory voter, a party member, or you could be an ex-member, because we've just been told that the Tory membership has dropped below 100,000, which is amazing. When David Cameron became the leader of the Tory party back in 2005, they had nearly 300,000 members. Worth remembering that Corbyn's Labour Party have currently got 570,000 members. So I want to know from you, if you're a Tory supporter, member, ex-member, does she still have your support? If you think yes, absolutely, Theresa's the girl, she must stay as Prime Minister, call me on 0345 6060 973. Or if you think, sorry, Theresa, move over, you can text me to 84850, or perhaps you can suggest another leader, in which case you can, of course, tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage and LBC, and you can follow us from here in Manchester on Facebook Live, where you can comment as well. Now, joining me is the former International Development Secretary, former Chief Whip and Conservative MP for Sutton Coldfield, Andrew Mitchell. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Nigel.
Good morning. Now, does Theresa, come on, let's be frank about this, is she commanding the support of the parliamentary party?
Well, there's no agreement on any successor, and I think that the whole of the parliamentary party recognises that she's not going anywhere at the moment, and therefore will want to focus on the 3 key issues which face Britain and face the Conservative Party at this upcoming conference.
Right, and one of those, of course, is Brexit, Andrew, and I very much enjoyed doing a big Brexit debate in your constituency during the referendum campaign. But, I mean, isn't what she's doing with Brexit just sort of kicking the can down the road? Isn't it effectively satisfying nobody?
Well, we all remember your visit to the Royal Town, Nigel, with great affection when it was packed out in our great town hall.
It was fabulous,
and thank you very much indeed for coming to the Royal Town on that day. I mean, the first key task is to deliver a successful Brexit, and I think that the best thing for the Conservative Party to do is to get behind the negotiator, David Davis, give him their full support as he tries to land what are very difficult negotiations, but land them successfully for Britain. But of course, that's only the first of the key issues at this conference. The other 2 are firstly re-establishing the fundamentals of capitalism and free enterprise. That is the way that we lift the living standards of everyone in a free society. And secondly, to address the huge intergenerational unfairness which characterises Britain today. And those are 3 key great tasks which I think the Tories are well placed to tackle. But the first, as you rightly say, is delivering a successful Brexit.
And in terms of capitalism and free markets, generally, I would have thought Theresa May has been seen to be somebody who's pretty interventionist as opposed to free market. But I'm particularly interested in the third point you raise about, the intergenerational unfairness that there is in the country, and that is certainly true. And Jeremy Corbyn became so popular, Andrew, that a friend of mine, nightclub owner in Kent, said the weekend after the general election, at sort of midnight on the dance floor, you know, the youngsters are chanting, "Oh, Jeremy Corbyn." So he did strike a chord. Do you honestly think, do you really think that by saying that the maximum tuition fee being frozen at £9,250 a year, do you really think that is going to get young people coming to you in droves?
Well, it's a minor part of the solution, but of course the absolutely critical area is building more houses. The opportunity to own your own home, to get a foot on the ladder, even to rent at a reasonable price, is greatly diminished from what it was when you and I were youngsters, Nigel.
Well, that's
we have to tackle that.
No, that's certainly true. So how many houses a year are you going to build?
Well, if I was Theresa May, I'd call in an upwardly mobile Minister of State. I'd say to them that their task over the next 18 months was to ensure that there were 1 million new home starts, and that I'd be monitoring them along the way, and if they succeeded they'd be promoted to the cabinet, and if they didn't match up, then I'd fire them. But the absolutely critical thing is to build more homes in the right places across Britain, and that should be the number one task in tackling that third critical thing, which is dealing with this extraordinary intergenerational unfairness.
And we still have net migration continuing at 250,000 a year. Presumably, if we were to get a grip back on our borders with the European Union and elsewhere, we might need to build fewer houses.
Well, that of course is relevant. We've been looking very carefully in Birmingham at what is the likely future need for homes, and the balancing factor, as it were, is the absolutely unknown levels of inward immigration. So certainly this is something which matters a huge amount to people, and one of the things we'll be able to address in these Brexit negotiations. Yeah,
which I'm afraid have been kicked into the long grass. At least that's my view, and it's Boris's view too, isn't it? And Andrew, you've always been very much a party loyalist. You've always stuck with the leader. You've always, supported the cabinet, the shadow cabinet through your career. Boris Johnson just seems to, he literally undermined the Prime Minister's Florence speech by coming out the weekend before. He's at it again. Does he want to be sacked, or perhaps even more importantly, should Mrs May sack him?
Well, I think that the collective responsibility in the cabinet is terribly important, and of course it clashes with the desire for authenticity, which is one of the reasons why Jeremy Corbyn has been doing so well, and Boris is an authentic politician. The media think that Boris trimmed his views on Europe in the referendum for personal advantage. I put Boris Johnson on the parliamentary candidates list in 1992.
So it's all your fault, is it?
I can tell you this, that Boris is undoubtedly an authentic Eurosceptic. He has always been deeply sceptical about the European adventure, about the European project, and he feels very strongly about this. So I'm not surprised that he sets out so clearly as he does his views on leaving the European Union.
And how does that fit in, Andrew, to collective responsibility?
Well, I think it would be better, as I say, if all senior Tories got behind the negotiator, gave the negotiator their advice in private, and let the negotiator, David Davis, get on with delivering the best deal for Britain.
OK. And finally, Andrew, is it going to be a good week for Theresa May?
Well, it'll be a good week if we stick to dealing with those three key issues which you and I have been discussing, Nigel. That will determine how good this week is, whether the Conservative Party is able to focus on that agenda on all the next three important days.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Andrew Mitchell, former International Development Secretary, former Chief Whip, and the Conservative MP for Royal Sutton Coldfield. Well, we've had some views from politicos, some views from me. Let's get some views from the people that really matter, and they're the members of the public. They're the voters. They're the ones that tend to get ignored. Certainly on most TV stations and radio shows, but not here at LBC. Carol in Twickenham, you're on LBC. What do you think?
Well, I was incensed. That's why I phoned you. That how you're sitting there in your ivory tower, there's not one person that can lead this country. The fact that she is leading it, I think good luck to her personally, because Boris Johnson, yourself, you couldn't wait to get us out of out of Brexit, okay? But you're just sitting there, aren't you, criticising? Oh.
No, I'd like to be full of... Carol, I'd love to be full of praise. I'd love to say, this Prime Minister is fantastic. Do you know, she stood up earlier this year at Lancaster House, and then she called a general election. She said Brexit means Brexit. She said no deal is better than a bad deal. We're going to crack on and do this. And I have to say, I did, on LBC, praise that speech she gave Carol back earlier in the year. I thought, this is wonderful. She really means this. And now we're in October and she's done none of it, just kicked the whole thing into the long grass. So this is not personal against Mrs May, Carol. It is, for me, that she's not delivering Brexit.
I just wish that she could just turn round and leave everybody to it and say, you got us in this mess, you get us out of it. But she was the only person that they had, and instead of criticising all the way, they need to be backing her. I don't want it, but someone's got to do it, and there's not one man that can do it, not one. And if Boris Johnson tries to look like leadership material, what a joke.
Well, Boris, I think, fancies his chances, Carol, and who's to say if the Prime Minister goes on having as bad a week as the start she's had this morning, maybe by the end of the year we'll see a different leader. Carol, I thank you, and Carol saying the Prime Minister needs support, and I think the point that I'm making back is she would deserve support if she was actually delivering. Teresa the appeaser is toast. She is utterly useless. Time for Jacob Rees-Mogg to rise. That comes from Gordon by Twitter. I'm sure I'll get a few more of those as the course of the morning develops. I'm Nigel Farage, live from Manchester for the Conservative Party conference. The time now is 10:30. Prime Minister May has arrived in Manchester, given her first interview. It's not necessarily seemed to have gone all that well, and the Tory clans are gathering. But her leadership is in some doubt. She hasn't really been able to deliver. She doesn't come across as being particularly decisive, and the party does appear to be at war over Brexit. Mind you, there's nothing particularly new about that. Now, we just before the break had Andrew Mitchell from Royal Sutton Coldfield, and he says, look, it's all fine. Just give David Davis the authority and Teresa's the right leader and it's all going to be great. But I wonder what, when I say Sir Bill Cash is a veteran Eurosceptic, I mean that in the nicest possible sense, Bill. Good morning.
Nigel, I think you're a veteran as well, aren't you?
Well, I've only been doing this for 25 years as a Eurosceptic. You've been doing it rather longer than that, I think.
Well, I know.
Now, tell me something, Bill.
By the way, Neil Hamilton sends his best wishes. I happened to bump into him last night. I'm sure you'll love that.
Oh, I'm delighted. Thank you. That cheers my Sunday morning up no end. Bill, you were passionate in that referendum campaign about Brexit for all the reasons that we know. Is this Prime Minister, the leader of your party, holding faithful to that vote, in your opinion?
Well, let's get a few facts straight. First of all, the referendum was passed in the House of Commons by 6-1. In fact, the notification of withdrawal act was passed by 494 to 105 or 110 or something. And we got the repeal bill, which, as you know, I did the original draft of, was accepted by the government, and that went through with a majority of 36, which in the circumstances was pretty good. And we're now moving into the committee stage. So in terms of delivery, the answer is we are on track.
Are we?
And
Are we?
I also would say that the intransigence that's being demonstrated by the EU in the shape of Juncker and that dreadful speech, which I'm sure I know you deeply resented, and so did I, and also the Barnier approach is actually creating a circumstance in which I think more and more people are saying, well, if that's what they were saying, if that's what they'd been saying before the referendum, we'd have got a vote of around 70%.
I don't doubt that, Bill. And in fact, that Juncker speech, I was sitting right next to him when he delivered it, and I did respond to it. But the point I'm making is we didn't vote for a transition period. We didn't vote to go on paying £10 billion a year. We didn't vote for open-door immigration to the European Union to continue for 5 years minimum after the Brexit vote. And yet this is what a Conservative Prime Minister is saying we should do.
Well, I thought, despite what you said about her appearance on the MAR programme about half an hour ago, I actually thought that she dealt quite effectively with this question about EU jurisdiction after we ceased to be in the treaties on the 30th of March 2019. I've been really on this the whole time over the last few months, as indeed have others, including Boris and various other people. And the reality is that as long as we are not subject to EU jurisdiction and the European Court after the 30th of March 2019, when the treaties cease, then that is what we said we would deliver. Now, there is still a lot of debate because we're going into the committee stage of the repeal bill, and there are those who want to extend the implementation period into including European jurisdiction. And that is going to be a major debating point in about 10 days' time in the House of Commons. What I can say is the Labour Party have absolutely done a complete U-turn.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Reversed. I mean, it's so disgraceful, Nigel. And you and I, we debated together in the Oxford Union. You know, you and I know one another really well, and we know this territory. And it's outrageous the way the Labour Party have behaved.
I agree with that. There are millions of Labour voters out there going to feel very betrayed by it. But tell me, Bill, does this Prime Minister, Bill, given the process we're engaged in, does this, in a word, does she have your support to stay on as Prime Minister through the Brexit process?
Yes, she does, and I'll tell you why. Very simply, because, as I've explained, we are on track. There are difficulties which are coming from the European Union. There are issues which have yet to be completely clarified, but actually that will be resolved during the course of the committee stage that I've just said. In addition to which, when we repeal the European Communities Act, and you above all, with me and other people who've been in this business for a long time know perfectly well that the idea that we would have been able to repeal the European Communities Act 1972 was a sort of holy grail, which we never really thought that any other previous government would do. It is being done. It's there in black and white in that withdrawal bill. It was going to be called the Great Repeal Bill, but it's now called the Withdrawal Bill. And basically, it's enormous progress, Nigel. I know that you must accept that.
Well, it's progress, but it's not what actually most people who voted Brexit thought they were getting. But no, I take the point. The legal process is moving forward. So, Bill Cash, thank you very much for joining us this morning. So there you've got two sides of a Tory party, and they're uniting around Mrs May as Prime Minister. But in some senses, folks, they have to do that because it's the Tory party conference and they need to show some unity, even though there are some that want this kicked down the road forever and there are others that would like it to happen more quickly. I wonder what Tony in Fareham makes this. Tony, does this Prime Minister have your support?
She did, but not anymore, I'm afraid, Nigel. It's too late, really, to start talking about tuition fees and first-time buyers now. It's that territory has been hijacked by Jeremy Corbyn. What I was screaming at her, absolutely screaming at her during the election to address the young and to address what you quite rightly identified as generational unfairness, and that is to cut tuition fees, perhaps by half, for a couple of years, and then reintroduce it on a slower basis. Put up the national minimum wage to £9 an hour. Increase the basic tax threshold, and most importantly, put in a penny on income tax to pay for this, which I think most of the British population would have worn quite happily. I would have, no problem at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Tony, her problem, and you're right, that Corbyn has taken this territory very, very firmly. The other problem, I think, is saying, I mean, half of this package on tuition fees, half of it is, hey, good news, guys, we are not going to increase the maximum you can be charged every year from any more than £9,250. all that does, Tony, is to remind people how much it's been cranked up over the last few years anyway.
Well, exactly, and you know, and young people can see that, you know, and they will be looking at her statement today and just grinning, all of, you know, from ear to ear, really, because, you know, she had the opportunity to address this, and those two foolish people who were her advisors, you know, I can't remember their names now, but you know, I could have sat down with her and said, please don't do this, because
Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill is who you're thinking of, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I beg your pardon. Yes, and I would have said to her, don't do this. You have to address the young, because I could have forecast that that's what Corbyn would have done, and he's done it very
He's done it. He's done it. And the other thing she's saying is that you haven't got to start paying this back until you earn £25,000 a year, not £21,000 a year, and that'll save 30 quid a month. But you know what, Tony? They're still charging 6% interest on these student loans, despite where the base rate is. Tony, is it time she went?
Yeah, I think it is, yes. And, you know, she was exposed as Home Secretary as weak. You know, she butchered the police service, absolutely butchered the police service. She failed miserably on migration numbers, and she's just not strong enough, Nigel, to take us out of Europe. She's not a strong personality, and I think the party is in danger of losing all credibility now with infighting. It needs someone to take charge.
So who?
Well, I know you're going to laugh. It's Jacob Rees-Mogg.
I love the enthusiasm of Mogg supporters, but isn't it really rather unlikely that somebody on the backbenches, charming though Jacob is, who's had no ministerial experience at all, isn't it rather unlikely that he becomes the next Tory leader?
I think it possibly is, but I think he's got a huge amount of support out there because he's a clever speaker. He's very good at backing up his statements with facts. He answers questions directly. He looks people in the eye and answers them directly. The only other alternative for me is perhaps David Davis, but. Boris, I'm really not sure about.
Okay. Well, Tony, thank you very much indeed. And Tony, there we are, somebody who was a Conservative voter, who isn't a Conservative voter any longer, because he simply doesn't have confidence in Theresa May. It's not easy for her, though, in one way, is it? Because we've got, as David tells me, there are 25 people in the Tory cabinet, and only 7 of them are for leave, which gives more decision-making power to Remainers. That's what David said. And David, you're right. Actually, the Remainers have been leading this, and with Boris coming out and saying that we shouldn't have a transition period more than 2 years, I wonder whether Boris actually wants a transition period at all. That cabinet is very split. Doesn't make her life easy, but boy, she's not so far coming across as being a true leader. I'm Nigel Farage, live from Manchester for the Conservative Party conference, and the time now is 10:45. Theresa May is struggling. That's my view. We've had members of Parliament on from Remain and from Brexit, and they're all pretending it's great and it's going really well. But we all know the truth is, actually, it isn't. I think Boris Johnson, in many ways, exposes that. And then the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Ruth Davidson, then takes him on. So really, the battle between the two of them, they're completely different visions for Brexit, how it should happen, when it should happen. That is the fundamental fault line, I think, in this Conservative Party. And indeed, you could argue it's a fault line that's been there within conservatism going way back to 1972. The difference is now they're in government and it's their job to put Brexit into place, and so the pressure is really, really on. Now, I'm looking for someone to have a private lunch with me. Thanks to Franco's Italian restaurant in central London, you can bid to join me for a private lunch, and not only will it be great food, but we'll do it on a Friday when I'm not broadcasting in the evening, so we can do it properly, if you understand what I mean. Why are we doing it? Well, it's because of Global Radio's Make Some Noise charity, supporting youngsters and their families living with illness, disability, or a lack of opportunity. And by supporting Global's Make Some Noise charity, little projects are ones where we can make an enormous difference. So the auction prize is there. Bids are coming in. It closes at 7:45 on Thursday, the 5th of October this week. You've got to be 18 to enter and to come to lunch with me. And you can simply bid. If you want to bid, see what the price is now, go to lbc.co.uk and read those important terms and conditions. back to our callers. David in Birmingham. Is Theresa May somebody that still gets your support?
Absolutely, Nigel. And I think what it is, somebody has to lead a team. She's leading the team, and as you've already seen, 2 ministers on today that have said that they'll get behind her. The process is on track. Negotiations on negotiations. All sorts of ideas are put into that. Opinions are like belly buttons. But what has struck me this morning, though, Nigel, is the way that you've criticised the Conservatives and you're trying to divide that party, yet you've got a divided party yourself. I mean, you've just called one of the leadership candidates a Nazi and a racist, and 21% of the people that voted for her, the same.
Well, actually, David, I haven't used...
Nigel.
David, I haven't used either of those words. Where are you inventing that from?
Nigel, this has come across. You told us to leave.
So you've just come on the radio, David, and said that I've used these two words. I haven't used them.
Nazis and racist, 21% of the people you've called. It's over Twitter. People.
Oh dear! Right, David. David, there's no point having this argument. I haven't called her that, and we will talk about that. In fact, at 11:30, we'll talk about that. Do you know what? At 11:30, David, we are going to interview the new leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton, and we will talk about that particular candidate.
Have you said that you and these various MEPs would have left your party if Anne-Marie Waters was elected?
Yes, that's right, I have. But anyway, we'll do it at 11:30. David, you're boring me. I'm sorry. We're talking about the Prime Minister and whether she can survive the week. I wonder what Lisa in Redcar makes of that proposition. Lisa, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Not a bit.
I believe that Theresa May has basically... She's ruined what we wanted. It wasn't the Brexit we voted for. We wanted it now. And she's now made a transition period of around 2 years, which probably translates to more. I think that what we really, really need is a pro-Brexit Prime Minister running our country.
And if we... I mean, right now, Lisa, would you vote for this Conservative Party with Theresa May as Prime Minister?
Absolutely not, no.
But would you vote Conservative if, let's say, Boris was Prime Minister?
No, I think, to be honest, the one person who I really have faith in to lead our country to greatness, into history for Brexit, would be yourself. I think we really need...
Well, that's kind of you, but at the minute I'm not quite in that position, and
I know.
You know, we have to face reality, Lisa, and where we are. But you feel let down by her, and she's basically kicking the can down the road, isn't she?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree. I can't disagree with that, Lisa, at all. I thank you very much for your call. June in Wimbledon says, the reason for the coronations of Prime Minister is that Clegg had the bright idea of 5-year parliaments. This should be repealed at once. That's part of it, I think. Anne in Barnstable says, I feel sorry for Theresa May. Let's not forget, she wouldn't be in this position if David Cameron hadn't had a hissy fit and flounced off, leaving the country to it. Trying times. Anne in Barnstable feeling quite sorry for the Prime Minister. Penny in similar vein says, I watched the interview with Andrew Marr. He was very aggressive and tried to get her to answer hypothetical questions. She's not my favourite PM, but I feel the media need to back off and stop trying to create news. Penny, I tell you what, the one thing I would say about Andrew Marr and that programme is he does ask good questions, but he's never aggressive. I've been interviewed by him, I don't know, 8, 9 times. I honestly, I don't think that interview was aggressive. I think it was when he said to her quite gently, you know, you're simply not answering any of my questions, was the moment at which she flushed up and started to look very awkward and very, very embarrassed. So I honestly, I don't buy the line that what she faced this morning was in any way aggressive at all. James is calling me from Finchley in North London. James, are you a May supporter?
Absolutely not.
Right.
I never liked the woman, and I think she's proved an old adage, nothing succeeds in public and commercial life like failure. And she was a rotten Home Secretary, and she's a rotten Prime Minister. For the good of the country, she should go now, and if she was really concerned for the country, she'd have made you the chief negotiator to deal with those so-and-sos in the European Union.
Well, she won't even speak to me, James, but I'm way beneath her. I'm a member of the lower orders, but that's by the by. So if she was to
get... member of the Conservative Party.
Sorry.
Not anymore, through her.
Right, so you were a member and you've left, yeah?
Yes. Yes, I joined UKIP.
Right, okay. I'm
hovering now because you've left as leader. I know why you left as leader, and I appreciate why you did it, and I sympathise with your reasons. But I'm afraid, unless the new chap is tough and strong, it'll fizzle out.
Well,
but anyway, Mrs. May...
That's a UKIP debate, which we are going to have in half an hour's time, James.
May, the May woman, is an absolute disaster. She's all-powerful to be impotent, and the sooner she goes, the better. It's as if she's like a second Neville Chamberlain who didn't want to fight the Germans, and she has no heart to deal with getting out of the European Union. She doesn't believe in it.
Right, so James, let me ask you, let's say she has an absolute mayor here this week in Manchester and says, do you know what, I got to go. You know, the party doesn't really support me. They may come on shows on Sunday mornings and pretend it's all happy families, but it isn't. Should the Conservative Party anoint somebody to replace her or go through a messy leadership election?
I think they should choose somebody who would emerge. And who would have the prime concern to get us out of the European Union at all costs. I mean, the woman is a liar. She turned around and said, "No."
That's a bit strong for a Sunday morning, James. I mean, look, let's not call her that. It's Sunday morning. But James, I do sense your deep dissatisfaction with the way she's leading the Brexit process. And I've got time for one more call. Charlotte is calling me from the Forest of Dean.
Oh, good morning, Nigel.
Good morning. So, is she up to the job? Should she stay? Is it time she went?
No, she's not up to the job. The interview on Mara this morning was absolutely embarrassing. And I feel that since her speech at Florence, we're all going to get sold down the river. 17.4 million Brexit voters have just been sold down the river, and we now have no real party to rely on or to present our views in any kind of positive way. As far as I'm concerned, we've not only got a Vichy Parliament, we've also got a Vichy government, but we've also got a Vichy Parliament, in my view.
Wow, well, that's a very strong note to end that hour's debate on, and thank you very, very much indeed. Well, coming up, leading businessman and co-founder of the Leave.eu campaign is coming on after the break to say that Brussels must not be allowed to boss Britain around. It's time we stood up and said we're ready to walk away. So, should Mrs. May be prepared to walk away from these negotiations? If you think absolutely we've had enough of Mr. Juncker and the crew, then call 0345 6060 973, or if you think no, we've got to stick it out in the national interest, text to 84850 or tweet more or less whatever you like using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Stay tuned, because we'll also be speaking to the new leader of UKIP, and it all starts next.
On FM, online, on your mobile, and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC. LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
I'm here in Manchester, and it's going to be a very big debate this week as to whether Mrs. May can actually hold this party together and stay on as leader. But the issue above all, and I know we had Andrew Mitchell on from Royal Sutton Coldfield, their MP, telling us that there's going to be a big debate this week about what they're going to do about student fees and helping people to buy houses. And yeah, sure, all of this stuff will get debated. Other challenges to do with Social Security, all of that will get talked about. But there's no point pretending. This is all about Brexit and a party that has got some very, very deep divisions within it. Now, joining me now is Richard Tice, businessman and co-chair of Leave Means Leave. Richard, good morning.
Morning, Nigel.
Now, you joined me hard on the heels of an article that you wrote in the Telegraph earlier this week, basically criticising the government's position, saying we need to get on with it. Just want to ask you firstly, I had Sybil Cash on the line half an hour ago, and he said it's all going wonderfully. The legislation's going through Parliament. Trust the Prime Minister. We should be jolly grateful that we are where we are. How do you feel about that?
Well, look, I think there's nothing wrong with optimism. He's sort of reflecting, in a way, Boris's optimism. But the reality is that everybody wants the government to get on with it. And the more people I talk to, whether they voted Leave or Remain, they can't understand why it's taking so long. And for many people, you know, actually, why can't we just leave? And I think the really interesting debate now over the next few weeks will be how the EU responds to the Prime Minister's speech at Florence and frankly, the concessions she made without asking for anything. And if the EU overplay their hand, then I think more and more people will say enough's enough. We're not going to get a deal. Can we just walk away?
So would you just say, right, cheerio, fellas, we're off tomorrow, or do you give them some time to think about the fact we're serious about walking away? How would, Rich, if you were in charge, how would you do it?
I would be publishing the plan for going to WTO rules in March 2019, within the next 3 or 4 weeks, so that everybody, both in this country, the people and businesses, know what the plan is, and so that the EU also knows that we are really serious about this. And I would be absolutely crystal clear to the EU. I would say, if we haven't agreed a transition deal by Christmas, then we're walking. And likewise, if we haven't agreed the heads of terms of a free trade deal by the end of Q1 next year, then we're walking, so that everybody knows exactly where they stand. And that way, you have clarity. Of course, there's going to be a bit of organising to do to get there, but everybody knows where they're going. What the EU are doing at the moment, and the real danger is that we fall into their trap, is that they're just stringing us along. And the longer they string us along, the more desperate we will get as we get closer to March 2019.
But if we were to follow your path, and it's interesting because the European Parliament are debating Brexit on Tuesday in Strasbourg, and there'll be the first vote in the European Parliament on Brexit. So we will get some flavour, Richard Tice, of whether the European Parliament wish to be cooperative or not. But if you listen to the great and the good, they tell us that if we were to leave without a deal, to go to World Trade Organization rules, that effectively we'd all need to wear a parachute because we'd be going off a cliff edge.
No, the reality is there's no cliff edge, there's no cliff. Our view is there's a springboard of opportunity. And of course the EU, you know, and in Parliament, I mean, you know better than anybody, they're bound to send a very tough signal. But the thing they fear most, and this is the biggest leverage we've got, is that we leave in March 19 and we pay nothing more. And legally, we're perfectly entitled to do that. Morally, as the Prime Minister said, we should look at paying some payments beyond that. But if we pay nothing from March 19 onwards, the EU has got a serious financial black hole. And that's our biggest negotiating strength.
But what happens to trade? I mean, we would go into a tariff regime with the European single market, and we would not have had time, presumably, to negotiate any of our own free trade deals around the rest of the world.
Well, that's the key thing, isn't it? I mean, let's remember, people make a big thing about tariffs, but, you know, the average tariffs are about 3%. We've already had a currency devaluation of between 12 and 15%. So actually, businesses are doing very well, or exporters are making enhanced profits. And in terms of negotiating free trade deals, you know, Liam Fox and his large department, hopefully the discussions they're having, the working groups they've got, are progressing that as we speak. And if they're not, they need to be accelerating that, because that's the confidence that people want. And the other thing, of course, we can do, if we leave and go straight to WTO, is we can unilaterally reduce tariffs on lots of goods, particularly from third world countries, in particular in Africa, on goods that, you know, we don't produce, oranges, coffee, things like that, that would actually reduce people's weekly bills in their supermarkets. And that's a great opportunity.
Now, I know listening to you, Richard, there'll be Remainers who will be listening with incredulity at what you're saying, but there'll also be a lot of Leavers listening to you, saying, well, this is all very interesting and very positive, but why is it, Richard Tice, businessman and co-chair of Leave Means Leave, that if we listen to the British Chambers of Commerce, we listen to the Federation of Small Businesses, we listen to the Institute of Directors, the CBI, why is it that every voice of business we hear says actually the transition deal is absolutely necessary?
I mean, these are the same organisations that were a key part of Project Fear, and how wrong they've been. They said that, jobs would go. We're employing 400,000 more people than a year ago. Property prices would fall. It would all be a disaster. Their credibility is the square root of zero. And it's interesting, isn't it? My fellow co-chair of Leave Means Leave is the former Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce, John Longworth. And there is no one who knows more about this subject and understands it better than him. So, I think that is a key signal. These people, they've got, they're looking after the vested interests of some of the big multinational corporations, for example, the CBI. And, they quite like protectionism. They don't want innovative new competitors starting up and taking their business.
I think, though, to persuade people of your case, you're going to need a lot more business voices than just two of you.
Correct. And of course, some of the greatest business voices are the likes of James Dyson, probably one of our greatest entrepreneurs ever, the likes of Tim Martin of Wetherspoons, the likes of Peter Hargreaves of Hargreaves Lansdowne, FTSE 100 Business, all of those great entrepreneurs who've started businesses from nothing. They are very comfortable about going to WTO. And I would say to listeners, you should have more confidence and comfort from those sort of entrepreneurs than from the corporate managers who've climbed the greasy corporate pole.
Okay, and you're coming to Manchester tomorrow. You've got a meeting tomorrow. I understand you've got a rather popular speaker coming to your event.
We have indeed. We've got Jacob Rees-Mogg as our key speaker at our event at 4:30 tomorrow afternoon, and the title of the speech is "The Threat to Brexit." And my concern is that the threat now is greater than ever. If we have a long...
Yep. He's gone. Richard Tice has gone, but I think we pretty much got there. Okay, so Richard Tice of Leave Means Leave with his co-chair John Longworth, they say we're wasting time. Really, Mrs May needs to give an ultimatum, a deadline, and be prepared to walk away. And that's what I'm asking you over the course of the next few minutes. Should Mrs May be prepared to walk away? If you think, yes, we really do need to get on with this, call me on 0345 6060 973. You can text to 84850. And, of course, you can tweet on @LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC. Matthew in Heathrow, good morning.
Morning, Nigel. Well, I didn't think I was going to say it, but I think, we are almost coming to the point that I think we're going to have to walk away. But because it sounds like they want us to give everything and then eventually and don't even want to get to the trade, to talking about trade, but at least we've seen some of their cards. But I think once it grounds to a halt, we're going to have to walk away. But what we've got to do is actually revoke the Article 50 because we do need more time. It's going to take 3-4 years more. So we've got to revoke the Article 50. We can at least start doing some sort of controls, getting immigration in registering as they enter and leave, and then get ready for leaving without a trade deal in 3-4 years' time. We're still going to have to pay in, but at least we're going to have some sort of veto.
But do we really need to wait for 3 or 4 years to do this?
We're not ready for it. I mean, that is why they're trying to get this interim arrangement and everything where we're going to pay, we're going to do everything, but they don't even want to give us that. The only card we've got is to say, they've made it clear that they want to say, now they'll rather be better without us, but they still want us to get money from us. So,
okay, so Matthew, in essence, we prepare for no deal because they're not being cooperative, but we need time to do it, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. And
absolutely.
We get that time.
Thank you. Thank you. No, Matthew, thank you. Well, can I just say that to me, we are dealing with completely unreasonable people. Juncker, Barnier, Verhofstadt. I mean, they don't want a deal. They want us to be punished, and they're stringing us along, and we keep making concessions. Goodness me, the Florence speech made plenty of them. We're going to find out more on Tuesday. We'll get the tone of the European Parliament towards Brexit and a vote. Imagine spending years negotiating all of this, and then at the end of it, the European Parliament could veto the whole thing. We do have to be prepared to walk away. There's nothing particular to fear. It's not a cliff edge. Tariffs, as Richard Tice pointed out, tariffs of a few percent. Goodness me, the currency moves up and down that amount every single month. I'm Nigel Farage, live from Manchester from the Conservative Party conference, and the time now is 11:15. Does Mrs May need to be prepared to walk away? You know, she was very clear earlier in the year that no deal is better than a bad deal. The volume of that got turned down. We were beginning to hear a little bit of it again today, but nobody really thinks she's serious about it. If she was, I guess she wouldn't have gone for a transitional arrangement for around about 2 years, she says, which really means up until the next general election and beyond. And anyway, the case was being made by Richard Tice of Leave Means Leave, and he talked about the fact Jacob Rees-Mogg was coming to speak about saving Brexit at that meeting tomorrow. And we've had a few of you on today saying that you think Jacob Rees-Mogg is wonderful. John and Liz have a different point of view. John and Liz text and they say, Jacob Rees-Mogg leading the Tories, bring it on. It will be like watching Charles Hawtrey in a carry-on film and will finally remove the last obstacle to Jezza in government. Let's all keep our fingers crossed. So there's always more than one opinion about these things. Is it time to walk away? Adrian in Finchley, what do you think about the government's strategy and indeed the way they're being treated by Barnier, Juncker and the others?
Hi there. First of all, let me say I'm a great supporter of yours. I used to belong to UKIP, but I left when you had all the leadership problems, but I think I'm about to rejoin.
Well, that's party politics for you, isn't it? I mean, I've been here, Adrian, talking about problems in the Tory party. It happens in all parties. It's politics, you know.
Exactly. But I don't think she should walk away. I want to know why there isn't a lot more discussion about when we're going to get paid out. If Europe, whatever you want to call it, EU, EC, is so great, so marvellous, so big, so strong, where's our share when we do go?
Well, I mean, actually, we do have about 9 billion sterling invested through the European Investment Bank, and you could argue that the £180 billion net that we paid in since we joined, that we sort of, you know, we're shareholders in the buildings and the assets. You could argue that, Andrew, but I don't think that argument would get you very far. But okay, so
it's Adrian, by the way. But why
Adrian,
isn't there a lot more discussion on it?
Well, there's no discussion on it because the British government have accepted, in principle, that we are going to be paying something to leave. That's why.
Completely stupid, just completely ridiculous.
And what about trade?
Why can't you, people like you, Rees-Mogg, get back into it and push those points?
Well, those points can be pushed, but so you would hang around and not walk away just to make sure that...
I would switch, I would hang around, make sure I'm still on the board of management, if you like, the board of directors, and push my point. Not how much am I going to pay in, but how much are you going to pay me out?
OK, we will pass, Adrian, that suggestion on to the Prime Minister. Different tack. I might try it with Juncker on Tuesday because I'm going to be there. How much are you going to pay us, Jean-Claude, and see how we go? Now, the big breaking news story this morning is that Catalonia's independence referendum has begun in chaotic fashion, with clashes occurring as police attempt to prevent the vote from taking place. The Spanish government has pledged to stop a poll that was declared illegal by the country's constitutional court. Police officers are preventing people from voting, seizing ballot papers and boxes at stations. In the regional capital of Barcelona, witnesses said police had fired rubber bullets during pro-referendum protests. 38 people have been injured, most of them lightly, say Catalan emergency services. The Catalan leader has condemned this as unjustifiable violence. How is the day unfolding? Well, we've got Louise on the line. Louise, good morning.
Good morning. Hi there.
Hi there. Tell us, whereabouts in Catalonia are you?
I'm in a provincial town, Santilloni. It's about 40 kilometres from Barcelona.
Okay.
I'm at a poll station right now, and the people are terrified, basically. I mean, they're all stood up queuing to vote, but everyone's absolutely, shaking, really.
So have you, in a sort of smaller town outside the big city, have you seen evidence of the police trying to close the polling station down?
Well, I spent the night in the polling station to keep it open.
Right.
This morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, the Catalan police came round and they tried to seal it off, but they couldn't because there were too many people in the building. So at the moment, we've just got Catalan police here actually being very pacific and trying to keep the peace. But we've just had a military police helicopter flying over, which means that they won't be taking very long to come here. And having seen the shocking images from Barcelona, you can imagine we're very frightened. I mean, I had my 2 kids with me, and I've just taken them off to stay with a friend because it's definitely not a place for children to be.
Right, and you are going to stand your ground, Louise, are you?
Yeah, God, yeah. I mean, we've got to help these people. I mean, these people are so pacific and organised and democratic, and they're facing such a dictatorial government. I mean, you can imagine these things happening in somewhere like China, not in Europe. Do you know what I mean?
Isn't the truth, Louise, that actually the concept of Catalan separation is still very much in a minority position?
Yeah, I mean, but the question at the moment is not about independence or no independence. The question now is about human rights being violated and terrible abuses being committed. I mean, yeah, I think that if there was a referendum allowed, well, if a referendum had been allowed 3 months ago, I'm sure the non-independent activists would have won. You know, I don't think it wouldn't have been. It wouldn't be.
So why,
no.
Given that arithmetic, and by the way, I'm not condoning the way the Spanish government have behaved at all. I mean, it's supposed to be a modern democracy, although I've seen the way it treats the Gibraltarian border at times, and I've shaken my head and wondered. But and also the fact they can put you in prison and leave you there for a year without charging you. I mean, it hasn't fully recovered from its past Spain. It seems to me at times.
No, it's taken a big step back, to be honest.
And it probably has, and I won't be going to Marbella very, very soon after this, clearly. But Louise, tell me something. Given that those that want separation for Catalonia know that at the moment they're in a minority position, why have they quite willfully tried to push something through that they know will lead to confrontation?
They just want to give their opinion, basically.
Okay.
They you know, that's what they want to do. They want to express their opinion. They want to let Europe know what they think. They don't want to be kept quiet all the time. I mean, they keep trying to negotiate with Madrid, and Madrid keeps saying, no, we don't want to talk with this particular government, with past governments they have.
And you obviously feel very strongly about their cause, Louise.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've lived here for 17 years.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of friends here.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're lovely people. You know, they're not, I mean... You know.
No. I mean, I was in Barcelona. Not just a few months ago. It's a very dynamic, successful place. Louise, thank you very much for giving us that assessment of what you're seeing there. Small town, 40 kilometres outside of Barcelona. And Louise, stay safe, please. Stay safe. Thank you for telling us what's going on. Fascinating, disturbing situation. I'll be interested to see what points about this get raised in the European Parliament next week and how much criticism there is of the behaviour of the Spanish government. But back for the last few minutes to the question of should Mrs May be prepared to walk away? Jeff in St Albans is going to give us the definitive answer on this. I know he is.
Oh, how do you do, Nigel? And thank you very much for all the good and hard work you've done. Thank you, splendid.
You're very sweet.
I think yes, she's going to have to, because income tax was 200 years ago, a temporary measure. It's not a bad tax, but it's temporary, and it's gone on and on and on.
Right.
The Emperor's Clothes, which was a children's story, went on and on and on. I don't want to get to 2019 or 21. I mean, I'm 52. I don't want to be here when I'm 82, and the thing's still going on.
So do you, I mean, basically, you think she's just kicking the can down the road, don't you?
I do, because I think she should never have called that election in the recent one in the way that she did. I really hope that Jacob and others give a good speech tomorrow. I'm very pleased about Henry Bolton, UKIP.
Well, we're going to talk to him very, very shortly, Jeff. But Jeff, you know, okay. In your view, we got to stop the nonsense. We got to put a deadline on this. But but would Theresa May herself ever do that?
No, this is where we have to be very, very careful, because I'm terrified that if they were to get rid of her prematurely, it could give Corbyn an opportunity that would just, God knows what country would I emigrate to. It's just frightening.
Okay, Jeff, you feel pretty strongly about it. Thank you for your call. And a last call on this from Dave in Croydon. Dave, good morning.
Hi, great to talk to you. Look,
any seasoned business person will tell you that this situation the Brexit situation is no different to negotiating any business deal. And most successful business people will tell you that to get a deal, the best deal for yourself or the best deal for your company or the best deal for your country is based on having the strongest hand. And I'm just amazed that our politicians have been unable to come to terms with the fact that unless we do pre-deals with the many companies, the many countries out there, whatever that means in any form and however they've got to do that, we won't have a back position. And if you don't have a back position to revert to, which is a strong position, you're never going to win, and you're always going to be on the back foot and the weak foot.
Which is exactly where we are, Dave, isn't it?
Well, we are. It's just we're trying to be nice and play ball and do all the politically correct things, which is very admirable, but it will not get us the best deal.
Could it also be, Dave, that people like our Prime Minister have never been in business negotiations? It's not their background, it's not what they've done.
No, they don't understand. What they understand is very strongly, they understand diplomacy. And fortunately, you don't understand diplomacy. I say fortunately.
Well, sometimes.
It's unfortunate.
Dave,
sometimes you've got to say it how it is.
Absolutely. Dave in Croydon, thank you. The voice of a businessman. Be pragmatic. Have a fallback position. Say it, mean it, and they'll probably come to you. I'm Nigel Farage, live from Manchester from the Conservative Party conference. The time now is 11:30. UKIP were in Torquay at the weekend, and on Friday afternoon they announced their new leader. It is one Henry Bolton, former soldier and police officer, and he made his maiden speech as UKIP leader lunchtime yesterday. Here's a snippet of what he said.
The Prime Minister called the last general election, in her own words, to strengthen my hand in the Brexit negotiations. She claimed that she offered strong and stable leadership. Well. Unfortunately, the country and many of our previous supporters trusted her. So, 14 months after the referendum, a question for you. Have we come any closer to regaining control of our borders?
Well, joining me live is UKIP's new leader, Henry Bolton. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Good morning.
Good morning. Now, I think there's some different counts on this. Some say you're the fourth leader in the space of a year, and others think it could be with interims the fifth. I don't know. But tell me something. Why are you going to last longer than the previous three or four?
Well, Nigel, I'm going to say that I think I've got a bit of a track record for endurance. I've stuck the course with a lot of things where others have not. I mean, different environments, perhaps. I stayed the course in Northern Helmand when the US Marine Corps rotated their battle groups 5 times whilst I was there. I stayed there throughout. I don't give up very easily. So this is not taking on the Taliban. It's a tough job, but I'm certainly here for as long as it takes.
And Henry, I mean, let's be frank. You're not a known public figure. I mean, tell us who you are in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm a former tank soldier, former TA infantry officer, commanded intelligence units in Bosnia. I've done ceasefire monitoring as Chief of Operations for International Ceasefires. I've advised heads of government on humanitarian crisis management, and I've helped some 14 governments to at a strategic cross-governmental level secure their borders. So international diplomacy, security, policing, and military. So I'm 54 years old. I have a lovely wife who's Russian. So if the FBI want to accuse me of having links with Russia, yes, indeed, I have. And I have 3 daughters, a 32-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old.
Why would anybody with that sort of resume want to get involved in leading UKIP. I mean, it is a very, very difficult job. It doesn't make you rich. I mean, what on earth motivated you? Because a lot of candidates stood. There were about 11 people who put their names forward to be UKIP leader, and none of us knew who was going to win. There was a favourite with the bookies, and we'll come to her perhaps in a moment. But what motivated you to want to do this?
Nigel, I have seen where we're going with Brexit, and Brexit is going to. Things don't end with us leaving the European Union. That is the first step on taking control of our own destiny as a nation in every respect, and I just see it going wrong. And I looked at the people, and some listeners may be aware that I was probably the last candidate to put my name forward. And I looked at the other candidates, and there's some excellent people there. But I thought if UKIP is not making itself an effective pro-Brexit opposition and is not engaging powerfully in this debate, then actually we are not contributing towards launching ourselves in the way that I described. Okay. And I don't see the government doing it. It's absolutely necessary. So I stepped into the breach because it is a job that has to be done, not just for the party, but for the nation.
Now, the question I'm going to ask you now, Henry, is a question I'm asking also to everybody out there on LBC listening or watching, and I want, after Henry's finished, you to respond to me on this. Has UKIP served its purpose, or does it have a future?
Oh, it's absolutely got a future, Nigel. You know, a lot of people have said to me over the weekend, a lot of journalists, well, they've asked me exactly that question. And my answer is, in a sense, what I've just said. It is about launching how we deal with this launches the nation into its future. And that future continues, of course. And what I've been saying to people is it's not just about leaving the European Union. It's about having the ability to give people in our communities a voice. There are so many people out there who are ignored. They're effectively disenfranchised, whether it's local planning permissions that they express concerns over and nobody's listening, whether it's about healthcare, schools, policing. The people just simply aren't being heard anymore. And I think for me, launching the country into its future is about making the country an optimistic and confident nation, and you can't have an optimistic nation if its citizens are being ignored.
Now, one note, Henry, of confusion. One note of confusion on this is part of your speech was about the levels of immigration and what was happening to the culture of this country, and what you said appeared to be quite strong stuff, and yet you've also said in a Sky News interview that you didn't believe in immigration caps. So can you please just square that circle for me? Because I think people might be a little bit confused seeing those two things.
Yeah, no, I mean, we need to be clever about our immigration cap. An arbitrary figure is not helpful. What we need to understand is that we can only assimilate a certain number of people, and we need to look carefully at what that is. And 1 year may be different to the next, but what we must absolutely ensure is that our communities, our public services are not in any way overwhelmed by this, and that we're not creating a concern in the country that immigration is actually swamping our own culture.
But if we don't have a cap, who sets the limit for who can come in and who can't?
No, sorry, Nigel. It's not that I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a cap. What I'm saying is that having just throwing an arbitrary figure out there of 50,000, 10,000, 0 is difficult. I mean, if you say 0, then of course the 0 figure is influenced by the number of people leaving as well.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But if I'm a voter, I'm saying, well, Henry, if you go into coalition government, what number are you going to be fighting for? I mean, where do you see the British population going?
No, the British I've already said, I think publicly prior to this weekend, that actually I want to see that immigration actually halted until we can understand exactly how we're going to manage it going forward. So at this stage, that's what I'd like to see. Right. So you halt it.
Fine. Yeah. Okay. Understood. That's a bit clearer.
That's the net
for all of us. And lastly, Henry Bolton, new leader of UKIP, Anne-Marie Walters, who stood on a very strong anti-Islam ticket, and I think that is a fair interpretation. She said the religion was evil. She appeared certainly with Nick Ferrari here on LBC and said some very strong things about the religion. And you'd said in the run-up to this ballot that you feared if she won that UKIP would become the UK Nazi Party. Did you not?
Words to that effect, yes, it was interpreted that way. I said
fine.
National Socialist direction. Yeah.
So what happens now to Anne-Marie Walters now that you're leader?
Well, that's up to Anne-Marie Waters. I mean, our constitution, as you know, Nigel, is quite clear on prescribed organisations, affiliation with particular individuals, and so on. And anybody in the party who's in breach of that, I would like to see dealt with in accordance with the constitution.
Would it, in your view, as the new leader of UKIP, would it be useful for Anne-Marie Walters and her campaign team, or some of them at least, to stay members of UKIP?
Not if they're going to continue with that rhetoric. No, that wouldn't be useful, no.
Okay.
That's
okay. Henry Bolton, thank you very much indeed. Well, that was Henry Bolton, folks, and it is a question. It is a question because at the general election just gone, I don't think UKIP was seen to be very relevant by people, but suddenly the Labour Party have completely U-turned on their commitments. I mean, completely. No longer are they talking about controlling borders. No longer are they saying we should leave the single market. And the Tories, well, at best, are kicking the Brexit issue into the long grass. And all the while, open door immigration continues. Is there now space for UKIP on the political battlefield, or is it a spent force and past its time? Please let me know what you think by calling 0345 60 60 973. I'm Nigel Farage, live from Manchester from the Conservative Party conference. The time now is 11:45. Well, you've heard Henry Bolton there, the new leader of UKIP, telling us a little bit about his life, a bit about his ideas. I thought the sort of big takeouts were that he spent his life in the military, in the police, involved with security issues. He's not been in elected politics at all before. He thinks we should halt immigration for a period of time to work out where we are, to then put a plan in place. And when I asked him about Anne-Marie Waters, who came second in this contest, whether she should remain a member and supporter of the party, he said he basically didn't like her rhetoric. So, under Henry Bolton, does UKIP now have a future? Have the Labour Party U-turning, the Conservatives dilly-dallying and kicking the can down the road? Have they now left a political space that UKIP can occupy? Or is it, as other commentators would say, a busted flush? I'm going to ask Anne-Marie in Chichester what she thinks of that. Good morning.
Oh, good morning, Nigel. I wasn't too impressed with what he said. His resume in his military and his police sounded good, but the fact that he left out the fact that he'd been in the Liberal Democrats, I think he'd actually stood for them at one time, and that he'd worked for the EU, why did he not mention these two things?
No, it's a fair point. And he did. And in fact, Anne-Marie, I can tell you that I first really got to know him on Eurostar, going to Brussels when I was going to the European Parliament, and he was working. He was working with the department there involved with common foreign security and defence policy. That is absolutely true. But then the fact that one has done that in the past doesn't mean you can't look at it and completely say, I reject this and here's why, does it?
No, it doesn't. But I'm just worried that he's going to prove to be another enemy within, like Douglas Carswell, because I want to join you again, and I'm not so sure. OK,
right. So you what you're looking for, Anne-Marie, is a bit more frankness from Henry Bolton about his... He stood for the Liberal Democrats in 2005 in Surrey, did he not?
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And he worked for the European Commission. Right, Anne-Marie? No. Actually, thank you for your call. Fair point, actually, that a lot of UKIP voters will say, well, how on earth do you go from being a Lib Dem to being UKIP, and how do you go from the European Commission to wanting to get Britain into a position where there's no transition deal at all, and you leave as quickly as you can? Jean in Boreham Wood, do you think there's space for UKIP and Henry Bolton?
Thank you very much for allowing me to come on to your show, Mr.
Sure.
Farage.
Hi.
I was very interested to hear what Henry Bolton had to say, purely because, as a UKIP member, I didn't know who on earth he was. I met all the other candidates. no sign of him. So therefore, I was very interested in what he had to say. My concern is with UKIP now that they have now turned themselves into just another mainstream political party. I listened to what he had to say about immigration. It seemed very wishy-washy. He didn't seem to be sure exactly what he was saying.
So, Jean, just 1 second, please. Do you think saying we should call a halt to immigration until we sort out where we are is wishy-washy?
Well, first of all, correct me if I'm wrong, he was saying we shouldn't put a cap on. Then he was saying, yes, we should put a cap on, but we can't say what the figure should be, which sounds very much like the Tories. No, I believe that we should stop immigration at the moment, you know, and we should look at the whole situation of what's happening in the country. I mean, there's a very, very serious situation going on, and the majority of people in Britain recognise it.
So, Jean, is your criticism, in short, because we haven't got much time...
Sure.
Is your criticism, in short, that he sort of sounds a bit too establishment? Is that what you're saying?
He's exactly establishment, and I think the reason he's been put in place with UKIP is party before people. I've ripped up my UKIP membership, as many of us, as I've discovered on social media, have done, purely because... the other thing that annoyed me was I actually feel that a lot of what Anne-Marie Walters had to say was very relevant. I've listened to her. I've actually spoken to her personally. This woman is very articulate. She's very reasonable.
The fact that somebody's articulate...
Likes Islam, the ideology. And to turn
is it right, Jean? Jean, is it right... To
turn round and accuse us, as he did, you know, saying that we were nothing more than Nazis, etc. I resent that. I'm a patriot. I'm a British patriot, like 17.4 plus.
Jean, is Islam evil in your view?
Sorry?
Is the religion of Islam evil in your view?
It is. A religion that promotes killing, that promotes stoning, that promotes grooming and raping. 14...
Are there, Jean, I mean, there have been some appalling things that have been done in the name of Islam, and some appalling things have happened in this country in the name of Islam. But do you not think, when you say the whole religion's evil, that you might perhaps be in danger of alienating hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people of Muslim faith in Britain who actually are integrated and living in our communities?
Hold on. That is a typical argument that's always espoused. Oh, there are moderate Muslims. I'm sorry. Yeah. Have you read the Quran? Have you read the Hadith? Have you read the history of Muhammad? I have. Now, to me, I don't care how moderate you say you are. If you follow, and they do, I mean, these terrorists, they're called extremists. Actually, they're good Muslims. They follow the Quran exactly as it says. Now, moderate Muslims turn around and try to excuse...
I am going, Jean, to have to end this call on time constraints, but Majid Nawaz is up, actually, after the news at 12, and you know, please, if you haven't listened to him on LBC, do, because there is somebody, you know, who is making a very strong argument that not everybody who follows that religion is bad. But, Jean, you hold your point of view. You hold it very, very strongly indeed. And don't forget, my auction for a private lunch is still running on lbc.co.uk. But it could now be that it's up in the thousands of pounds, and it's out of your price range. Alternatively, you can buy tickets to watch me on stage, because on the 10th of January, it's a Wednesday, I'll be appearing at the Hippodrome Casino in London. And again, it's for Global's Make Some Noise charity, raising money for people, you know, disabled people, young people who need just a little bit of help in life. And you can join me by choosing tickets for this. They vary between £85 or £125, depending where you're sitting. Just go to lbc.co.uk. And Paul in York, I'm going to ask you, were you impressed with Bolton? What future UKIP?
Yeah, brilliant. I think it's good future. If he can command a bunch of squaddies, you'll have no problem with the NEC.
Right.
He's definitely a team's player, and he's got a tremendous amount of people on his side who are talented. My choice was Ben Walker, but again, another talented, if you like, forces man. And it's what you need. Can I just mention, though, Nigel, I am glad, I am relieved that Anne-Marie Walter didn't get in, because she doesn't represent the vast majority of views.
No, well, I have to say, Paul, that I have to say honestly that I thought Anne-Marie Walters' politics was really very extreme indeed. I do understand there's a problem. I do understand there's terrorism. I do understand the cover-ups that have taken place in Rotherham and elsewhere. I understand it. But to effectively condemn an entire religion, to turn UKIP into a political party based on religion, I think would have been a complete and utter catastrophe. Paula, thank you for your call. Well, just a few quick thoughts there on the new UKIP leader, Henry Bolton. He's certainly got a big, big job to do, and it won't be very easy. Well, OK, don't forget, lbc.co.uk is where you can find the terms and conditions, either for that lunch or indeed for coming along to the London Hippodrome on the 10th of January. I'm Nigel Farage. I've been live from Manchester, from the Conservative Party. I'm back tomorrow evening from 7 p.m. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, it's Alex Salmond. But up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thanks, Nigel. I'm former Lib Dem. Shall I take over your party as well?
Well, you never know.
All right, thank you very much.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.